मानुषी संवाद में आप सबका स्वागत है. Welcome to the 9th September 2022 edition of Manushi Samvad. Today we have with us my very good friend Professor Gautam Sen from London. और Gautam da, आइए, welcome.
Namaskar. Thank you for having me.
जी, my pleasure and privilege, गौतम दा. और आप बात करना चाहते हैं ये जो बहुत इग्नोर्ड न्यूज़ है कि पाकिस्तानी वायुसेना एयरफोर्स को अमेरिका ने बहुत नए नए तोहफे दिए हैं. उसको मजबूत करने के लिए, उसको और भी ताकतवर बनाने के लिए कोशिश की जा रही है. इसमें क्या है अमेरिका का इंटरेस्ट और हमें उससे क्या संदेश मिल रहा है, इस पे तो आप बात करेंगे. पर उससे पहले मैं आपसे रिक्वेस्ट करूंगी कि ज़रा बताइए ये जो क्वीन एलिजाबेथ का देहांत हुआ, सो इज इट द एंड ऑफ एन एरा for Britain? What does it mean? And I also want to thank Power Privilege, my dear friend Minnie, for this support. Thank you, Minnie. Well, we start with a very good note. Thank you, Minnie. और चलिए गौतम दा बताइए ज़रा हमें कि क्या संदेश है हमारे लिए और अमेरिका ये क्यों कर रहा है. पर हाँ, मैं भूल गई. क्वीन एलिजाबेथ का देहांत, what does it imply?
She
And
was a much loved monarch, and it would be a very hard act for anyone to follow, and particularly for King Charles, who automatically became king once she passed away, because he has not been terribly popular because of his adultery and Princess Diana's death, which created a great deal of angst in the British public. However, there are situational constraints to being a monarch who is basically a symbolic presence without executive powers. So he will act in accordance with clear guidelines with which he will be extremely familiar by now, and he will have his advisor around him. And I have a sneaking suspicion that his queen consort, who has been denied the full title of queen because of being a divorcee, may turn out to be a rather canny operator who will keep some of his eccentricities in check. Beyond that, we have to wait and see.
okay, I think one day soon we'll discuss the royal family of Britain and the fascination that the British people have for this institution, especially for Princess Diana. We'll discuss that another day. But let's now today get back to the topic. तो थोड़ा हिंदी भी बोलिए, आपकी हिंदी अच्छी खासी है, पर टेक्निकल बातों में आप अंग्रेजी ही इस्तेमाल करेंगे, वो आपको खुली छूट है. जी बताइए.
ये जो वायुसेना, पाकिस्तानी वायुसेना के लिए मार्किन सरकार ने सहायता किया, इसका क्या संदेश है? A very charitable interpretation could be they don't want Pakistan to become totally dependent on China. That's one very charitable interpretation. And मैं पढ़ रहा हूँ ये संदेश क्या है? It is not intended for Bharat. But whatever the case may be, it is indeed a very important and corporeal message to Bharat. Because 80 F-16 fighters, which are being re-equipped and modernized, are not being done to keep them sitting in airports. The idea that they are very old, then making them better equipped is for a purpose. And that purpose has two very important implications for India. 80 F-16s, remember, it is not 10, it is not 20, it's 80 F-16s. They are not quite equal to India's new Rafales, which are 4.5 generation, whereas the F-16, I don't know with the modernization, will perhaps be 4th generation. India does not have 80 Rafales yet. Secondly, these F-16s are not quite the equal of our mainstay in the Indian Air Force, the Sukhois, but they are a serious issue. To which a very pregnant and important question arises, which I'm sure people in Delhi are perfectly aware of. The perception is that the United States is extremely keen to empower India against the Chinese threat to India itself and to the region. But with one fell swoop, it has posed for India a problem of a serious two-front challenge that seriously undermines its ability to cope with a Chinese assault. I have no doubt the Indian side has taken this on board and they will prepare accordingly. And India is more than capable of giving a more befitting reply than either adversary imagines or the public in India or abroad believes. I have many friends in the armed forces, and believe me, we have a very mean outfit, and it will not be bettered easily. Nor will capacity of India to fight a prolonged war, ये भी हम कर सकते हैं. हम लड़ाई करने के लिए बहुत तैयार हैं एवं इसके लिए मैं मोदी जी को धन्यवाद दे रहा हूँ. He has done more in the last few years than anybody in the preceding 20. अब जो भी सकते हैं गाली दे सकते हैं, but he has prepared rapidly, not completely because that always would have taken time, but substantially. Now we have to then ask ये अमेरिका ये खेल क्या, ये क्यों ये कर रहा है? ये तो बेवकूफ नहीं है, ये तो अच्छी तरह समझता है इंडिया का क्या परिस्थिति हो रहा है ये 80 F-16 के लिए. इसके दो कारण हो सकते. And I like to be very blunt about this. Like you, Madhuji, I learned a little bit on this call from you. मेरे लिए एक कारण लगता है हमारे 2020 का FCRA amendment. This has caused immense heartburn. ये बहुत दुख पहुंचा है हमारे मित्रों के घर में, क्योंकि हम लोग बहुत चालाकी से इसका शैतानी रोक दिया. क्योंकि you have to now give your undertaking, आप बाहर के पैसा लेके कन्वर्शन नहीं कर सकते हैं. इंडियन पॉलिटिक्स में इंटरफियर नहीं कर सकते. दिस वाज अ वेरी क्लेवर मूव. बैकडोर से हमने इसको रोक करने के लिए कोशिश किया. इसके लिए अगेन हमारे सरकार को बधाई. One, that to me is an underlying factor. बहुत सारे इवेंजलिस्ट जो स्टेट डिपार्टमेंट के सेकंड फिडल है हमारे ऊपर बहुत गुस्से है. एंड यू विल नो 204 में 5 में कैसे ब्लैकमेल करके इवेंजलिस्ट का वीजा they forced us to give. They blackmailed us over the Indo-US nuclear accord, and we had to give them visas to evangelists. That's now in the public realm, in the internet. That's one. The other thing, ये तो हमारे ऊपर खुश नहीं है. हम रशिया से पेट्रोलियम खरीद रहे हैं, हम उसका S4 इंस्टॉल कर रहे हैं. रशिया को डिनाउंस करने के लिए हम तैयार नहीं है. Absolutely rightly so. This is not our business. And most important of all, two things. Whatever you can say about Russia, etc., and communists, they have been faithful allies since the 1960s, and most particularly in 1971, when Russia mobilized 40 divisions on the Chinese border to tell them, आप यहाँ पे कुछ गड़बड़ मत कीजिए. जब इंडिया इस पाकिस्तान में घुसे, ये चाइनीज को बताया, आपने इस पे इंटरफेयर नहीं कीजिए, हमारे 40 डिवीजन आपके लिए इंतजार कर रहे हैं. कोई हमारे ये से पहले नहीं किया. They also sent submarines to the Bay of Bengal. And the 7th Fleet वहाँ पहुंचा, हमको डराने के लिए पहुंच गया था. Secondly, a very practical issue, हमारे mainstay Sukhoi is very dependent on maintenance and spares from Russia. हम क्यों इसके साथ झगड़ा करेंगे? ये रोक देगा. रोक सकता? पता नहीं. Thirdly, final point, ये जो कोशिश चल रहा है रशिया को इंटरनेशनल स्टेट से एलिमिनेट करने के लिए, रशिया को टूटने के लिए, they want to break up Russia into small countries. Exactly what they do to India also. Out of sheer greed for Russia's resources and to take it off the stage completely. This does not suit India. A world without Russia as a major presence does not suit India, and हमारे लोग को ये अच्छी तरह पता है. We will then be totally vulnerable to ये दो countries, China and Russia. They अपने आप कुछ understanding तो अब हो गया. Russia and the United States have already reached understanding. ये हमारे देश के लोग समझने के लिए तैयार नहीं है. What we have in the Indo-Pacific is a Sino-American condominium. ये condominium बहुत दिन से बने हुए है because they cannot afford to go for all-out war. ये लड़ाई नहीं कर सकते हैं. दो nuclear power ऐसे लड़ाई नहीं कर सकते. So what is being fought over is to define the contours of the Indo-Pacific, who controls what. It is not about one trying to eliminate the other because ये संभव नहीं है. The American economy will collapse if they sever ties with China. Look at the data of the degree to which the two economies intertwine. They लड़ाई नहीं कर सकते दोनों के बीच में. हम लोग को बुद्धू बना रहा है. The US uses China to scare us, and they ask for visas for evangelists. Arms खरीदो, border खुलो, trade शुरू करो. So we have to understand ये सारे साजिश है, सारे खेल है. I'm glad to say, despite any doubts some of the viewers may have, हमारे जो senior लोग हैं ये सब कुछ समझते हैं. I had a meeting with 3 of our most senior policymakers in 2005, and I had a discussion. उस वक्त इन लोगों को सब कुछ पता था. I asked them, China, अमेरिका में अंडरस्टैंडिंग हो गया, हमारा क्या परिस्थिति होगा? तो इन्होंने हमें कहा, ये तो हमारे बहुत सीनियर लोग थे, हम नाम ले सकते हैं, हमारे इसलिए कंटिजेंसी प्लान तैयार है. So thankfully we are not fools, but we are weak. हमारे सबसे बड़ा समस्या है हम vulnerable है. हमारे 10-12 साल बहुत खतरा है दुनिया. ये 10-12 साल में हम $5 ट्रिलियन इकोनॉमी बन गया, तब हम ये सब कोप कर सकते हैं. We can then cope with this much better than we are now. अब मुझे जो जरूरत देख रहा हूँ, अब जो हो रहा है, we have to combine diplomacy of a very clever sort. सबके साथ बातचीत, खेल, कभी-कभी थप्पड़ भी खाने के लिए तैयार हो. We have to be accept because we are not ready for war yet. We don't want to go to war because we are not ready. इसके लिए we will retreat sometimes. सरकार को गाली मत दो. Sometimes we have to make compromises which we do not like because we are preparing. India is on the way to becoming a warfare state. My article will come out on this subject in the coming week, in First Post. India as a warfare state. हम तैयार हो रहा है because we are the most vulnerable of the major countries because we are a major country. Because we are a problem for other people. We are a terrible problem for China because an empowered India with $6-7 trillion means Chinese dreams of dominating Asia खत्म. Pakistan टूट जाएगा. So they want to wage a war with us now when we are not fully ready. So हम इसलिए we are playing for time, which is the correct thing to do. And I have to again say, we are doing it quite well with a weak hand. So this is what it is. And I am a little bit shocked by this US F-16 deal because it is such a serious matter for India at this juncture to be made more vulnerable because we don't have enough Rafales at least for another 3 years. We have at least 2 S-400 systems installed, which is something. So we will see what we have to do. ये अच्छी खबर नहीं है.
अच्छी खबर नहीं है. अब 3-4-5 सवाल हैं जो आपने बातें कही. सबसे पहले आपने कहा FCRA अमेंडमेंट से हमने मिशनरीज को कंट्रोल में लाने की मोदी सरकार ने कोशिश की, परंतु जितनी तेजी से कन्वर्जन्स पिछले 8 साल में हुई हैं शायद कभी नहीं. और जितने खुलेआम मतलब बड़े बड़े कैंप्स लगते हैं, 2-2 हजार 5-5 हजार लोग इकट्ठे हो रहे हैं पंजाब में, हरियाणा में, जो कभी नहीं हुआ था.
आंध्र प्रदेश में
वो तो है ही है, सो है. परंतु हरियाणा और पंजाब उनका सेल्फ डिक्लेयर्ड मेन टारगेट्स थे. अब सवाल 2-3 है मेरे. FCRA अमेंडमेंट किया, पता नहीं कैसा किया, क्योंकि पहले सरकार अभी तक पिछले साल तक एक ट्रांसपेरेंसी थी एफसीआरए के बारे में। जो भी पैसा आता था वो होम मिनिस्ट्री की वेबसाइट पे लग जाता था। नाउ दे हैव स्टॉप्ड altogether. They have stopped publishing the data. Who are they trying to protect? That is my first question. And then I will ask you a couple of other questions related to FCRA. Secondly, political parties को allowed नहीं था, इन्होंने वो भी कर दिया। ये जरा बता दीजिए मुझे।
देखिए मधु जी, समस्या यही है, जैसे हुआ हमारे आर्टिकल 370 एंड 35A अमेंडमेंट हुआ, पूरा इम्प्लीमेंटेशन नहीं हुआ, वी हैव स्टेप बैक। एफसीआरए 2020 ऐसे हुआ, 2 steps forward and 1 step, 1.5 steps back, because we are constantly being threatened, and this Chinese issue has loomed very large, especially since 2020 and Cal 1, and we are making calculations of what we have to give up. Unfortunately, this conversion racket is the most serious challenge we have faced, in my opinion, in hundreds of years. ये एक बार हो गया, going back will be very, very difficult. Already, it is my view that we will never eject this Andhra Pradesh government again. They are themselves claiming 40% conversion हो गया, 30% भी कहिए, you need another 8% to have a government. They will combine with the minorities and 30% Christian vote, and then Andhra Pradesh, bye bye, goodbye. And तो अब तो तमिलनाडु का मंत्री कह रहे हैं हम अलग भंज हो जाएंगे, फेडरेशन बनाएंगे. This is a hugely important issue, and our vulnerability is being exploited. But I would like to suggest we could be a little bit more courageous and firm in our response. And believe you me, ये जो तमाशा चल रहा है, this is not just an evangelist issue, which is mainly out of the United States, United Kingdom, and some of the Scandinavian countries. The Scandinavians are very active in Nepal, by the way. Many people from Kerala are active in Nepal because they don't need visas. Now, Nepal is 1/3 converted already, according to senior politician. 1/3 converted. They want a northeast, a Nagaland, on the Chinese border. Punjab mein jo ho raha, this is in coordination with the government of Pakistan. Bear in mind, Pakistan was created by 3 Christian votes, 99 to 101, including the Christian speaker of the Punjab Assembly. They, of course, got kicked out very promptly. He was kicked out of his speakership in no time. In the 1940s, Pandit Nehru, our great Panditji, pleaded with every Christian organization to enter into a dialogue with him. Every single Christian organization in India repudiated the Congress and joined hands with Muhammad Ali Jinnah and the Muslim League, as instructed by foreign powers. Now, this is what they're looking for. Foreign powers will instruct, and they will do as they're told. And we already saw that in Kundakulam. वो तो WikiLeaks पे पता चल गया, कहाँ से ये कॉन्सल जनरल ने लोग क्रिश्चियन ऑर्गेनाइज को बोल रहे हैं आप रोक दो, ये क्यों रशिया से रिएक्टर खरीदा, हमसे क्यों नहीं लिया, हम इंडो यूएस अकॉर्ड दिया, हमसे नहीं लिया. So they want a constituency. Now, the data is very important. The Muslim vote in India is 18 to 22%, I think, perhaps a bit. Christian vote, they are saying, oh, 2-2.5%. I think this is bakwas. It is nearer 8 to 10. ये तो पहुंचने वाले हैं, and I'm sorry, ये 30% हो गया बस. Like West Bengal, बाकी 8% तो आप खरीद लेंगे. Bribery, intimidation. उसके बाद हमारे जो दर्शक है, अब सोचिए ये परिस्थिति आएगा, सबसे पहले 1000 years घर में पूजा करने के लिए परमिशन लगेगा. आपको परमिशन मांगने पड़ेगा मैजिस्ट्रेट से घर में पूजा के लिए. ये आने वाला है, अब बहुत दूर नहीं है यहाँ से. कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी का कोई जगह नहीं है, हमको लड़ाई करना है अभी, नाउ.
गौतम दा, आप एक तरफ बता रहे हैं, और वो सही भी बता रहे हैं, कि मोदी जी के चलते डिफेंस प्रिपेयर्डनेस बहुत सुधरी है हमारी, और बॉर्डर्स पे आर्मी की इक्विपमेंट, आर्मी की फैसिलिटीज, आर्मी का थोड़ा बहुत जो ख्याल रखना चाहिए, जो पहले नहीं रखा जाता था, मोदी जी इज मोर सेंसिटिव टू इट, मान लिया। फिर मेक इन इंडिया भी शुरू किया डिफेंस में, ताकि धीरे धीरे हमको बाहर से मंगवाना भी नहीं पड़े सारा जो हथियार है। परंतु परंतु आप मुझे ये बताइए, जो कन्वर्जन्स को खुला न्योता दिया हुआ है मोदी जी का, रोमांस जो है क्रिश्चियनिटी और इस्लाम के प्रति, जरा ये भी समझाइए हमें। एक तरफ वो बोल देते भाई ये तो उसी का हिस्सा है ना, कन्वर्जन्स के लिए इतने उदार क्यों है मोदी जी, और पोप से जाके मिलके उनके आगे झुकने की आवश्यकता क्या थी मोदी जी को? कोई जरूरत नहीं थी, और किसी क्रिश्चियन वोट बैंक ने इनको कभी स्वीकार नहीं करना। और तीसरा जो मेरा सवाल है, पहले उसी से जोड़ते हैं। अमेरिका, अपने देश में तो चर्चेस खाली पड़ी हैं उनकी, कोई जा नहीं रहा है, वो सिर्फ टूरिज्म के लिए टूरिस्ट स्पॉट बन गए हैं। वहां क्यों नहीं अपने ईसाई धर्म को संभालते, दुनिया में फैलाने के बजाय? ये मुझे नहीं समझ आती। और उनकी सारी पॉलिटिक्स अगर भारत से जुड़ी हुई है, ईसाई धर्म को या मिशनरीज को खुली छूट दे दो, नहीं तो हम तुम्हारी बैंड बजा देंगे, ये मैसेज होता है अमेरिका का, कितना प्रेशर करते हैं। तो पाकिस्तान में क्यों नहीं अपने ईसाई भेजते मिशनरी? वहां तो मार खाते हैं, पिटते हैं, और ईसाइयों की कोई हैसियत नहीं है। तो पाकिस्तान में जो होता है क्रिश्चियंस के साथ, अमेरिका को उससे क्यों नहीं दुख होता? वो उनको क्यों इतनी चमचागिरी कर रहे हैं अमेरिकन उनकी?
देखिए, ये हम कहा हमारे बॉर्डर सिक्योरिटी इम्प्रूव हुआ, इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी के बारे में मैं नहीं कह सकता। आप जो कहा, हमारी इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी बहुत वीक है ऑन मैनी लेवल्स। आप तो देखते हैं, हमारे सीएए कहिए, दिल्ली राइट्स कहिए, हमारे इंटरनल सिक्योरिटी का समस्या अभी भी है। नाउ कोई ने मुझे एक बात कहा, आई एम रिपीटिंग, आई डोंट हैव अ व्यू ऑन दिस, somebody very insightful said to me that his view is that the government is waiting for a much greater degree of India's economic empowerment before a crackdown. इन्होंने कहा, मुझे लगता है it will be too late. This is my fear. Now, on the question of churches in America and in England, many of them are becoming Hindu temples and mosques. There are no worshippers. But then Christianity, howsoever it began, and Islam, from when it began, are political ideologies. They were used to discipline their own population into obedience to the established authority and the monarchs. Obedience was a key attribute that was preached to the population. It was used to discipline the people in order to keep them together. And those who were not Christian were basically slaughtered, even by Charlemagne. 30,000 people were killed in Germany. And if you look at the expansion into Eastern Europe, Lithuania, these were all genocidal campaigns. This was politics. It's got nothing to do with the claims of sainthood and brotherly love. It's a bakwas hai. In the case of Islam, there is no pretense, because Islam, from the very beginning, was a political ideology. That is why what is happening in the United States and elsewhere in the Christian countries is not very important. They have established their unity by other means. They just want, well, at least so far, it is now weakening. Their domestic social unity is fracturing. Certainly in the United States, very severely, and in the United Kingdom, it is fracturing. But they want to create a constituency in third parties. They want India to be somewhat like the Philippines. I don't know if it will also become a brothel, which is what has happened to many Southeast Asian countries. Their capitals are basically brothels for rest and recreation of American sailors and horsemen. हम तो रोकना है ये तो हमें रोकना है. Now, the reason why they don't go to Pakistan, ये तो गला काट देंगे. पाकिस्तान में सरकार को कुछ कहने की जरूरत नहीं है, आम आदमी गला काट देंगे मिशनरी को. अफगानिस्तान में क्यों नहीं गया? गला काट देंगे. हमारे देश में सब कुछ चलते हैं.
उनसे रोमांस क्यों है अमेरिका का? गला काटते हैं और ऐसा नहीं कि उनको भी बख्श रहे हैं, कितने अमेरिकन को भी आईसिस ने गला काटते हुए उनका वीडियो खुद लॉन्च किया सोशल मीडिया पे। तो क्या मूर्खता है, हम तो कम से कम किसी का नुकसान नहीं करते। अभी जो अमेरिका उनको एम्पावर कर रहा है, उनको मालूम है हमने कभी अमेरिका का कोई नुकसान कभी नहीं किया, हमने कभी उनके किसी वाइटल इंटरेस्ट पे हमला नहीं किया। और पाकिस्तान जो है किसी को नहीं बख्शता। ऐसा नहीं है कि अमेरिका को बख्श देंगे, बिकॉज ओवरऑल द एवरेज मुस्लिम इज वेरी एंटी क्रिश्चियन, वेरी एंटी मुस्लिम,
Anti-American
एंटी क्रिश्चियन
and anti-American.
एंड एंटी अमेरिकन। अब सबको मालूम है एंटी अमेरिकन है, एंटी क्रिश्चियन है, और वो बख्शेंगे नहीं क्रिश्चियंस को भी। जब वो काफिरों का सर कत्ल करते हैं तो क्रिश्चियंस काफिर ना सही पर मिले जुले, उसके बावजूद ये चमचागिरी क्यों करते हैं? चाइना की चमचागिरी समझ आती है, इट्स अ सुपर पावर। ये तो फटीचर लोग हैं और तहजीब भी नहीं है बात करने की, except their aristocratic class, you know, they're very seductive. The Pakistani diplomacy, actually, if you ask me, is more sophisticated than European diplomacy, American diplomacy. They're really very seductive. And
I have to disagree with you, Madhu. Pakistan diplomacy has one great quality, which is that it does what is told by the great powers, America and China. So everything is very easy. And they have only one problem, which is India. You see, Pakistan has nothing. Pakistan is an artificial polity. It is held together by force. Because there has never been a democracy. Even Christine Fair, the scholar, says Prime Minister of Pakistan is like the mayor of a city. He has no authority, no power. But Pakistan has one thing India does not have. Thanks to again our great Panditji, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, they have geopolitical location. They were created by the British in order to prevent Soviet incursion further into subcontinent. That was the reason, and it is all in the public domain now, the documents. That was why Pakistan was created. Yes, there was a great fervor of Pakistan in India, and the mullahs who wanted Pakistan won the debate. As Venkat Dhulipala has shown, they won the debate. But Pakistan was ultimately created by British consent. And this was geopolitics, and this geopolitical location, which was catastrophic for us, which is why we have had to pay for Chabahar. We lost land access to Afghanistan, Central Asia, is why it has a trump card. Even the Russians are serenading them, and Americans are doing it for the same reason. The Russians are serenading them because they want to secure their perimeter via Central Asia. And Pakistan is a key player in this, Pakistan and Afghanistan. So they have nothing, but they have this location of enormous importance. Look at the trouble we have when
all
they
the
block
more
our
reason,
flights.
Gautam, if you have a jihadi power, and Pakistan is essentially a launching pad for global jihad. Primary focus India, but also global jihad. If that is the case, you want to clip its wings. Any sensible nation would want to clip the wings of Pakistan, not enhance their power. Are they mad or what?
No,
The
but you know,
British are mad.
Pakistani jihad abroad actually is a very small part of what has gone wrong for the West. Yes, virtually every jihadi assault in the United Kingdom has a Pakistani connection. But you know, most of these are homegrown in the UK. Though they have a Pakistani connection, they are homegrown Pakistanis. Now, what the Pakistanis do, they say to the UK, okay, we will cooperate. We'll have intelligence information for you, but you play ball against India. And the UK is also caught in this web that Pakistan is very important for intelligence cooperation on their domestic jihad problem. Now, India is a different matter.
This doesn't make sense, Gautam. I'll tell you why. Firstly, you feed and nurture a jihadi state. Pakistan is not a nation state, it's a launch pad for jihad through means fair and foul, through war as well as non war, through terror attacks as well as control of institutions and subversion, which is what they've done to American universities, which is what they've done to Oxford and Cambridge. You know that story much better than me. मैं सिर्फ ये कह रही हूँ कि मालूम है कि उनका एजेंडा ग्लोबल डोमिनेशन ऑफ इस्लाम, वो छोड़ेंगे नहीं किसी को भी. Would you not want to clip their wings instead of strengthening them all the time?
Let me
Do
let
the
me say two
Muslims
let,
not
let me say,
realize?
let me say two things about this. One is a historical matter. You will know the name of Iqbal Singh, the historian of the Congress Party documents. Iqbal used to say, a very astute man, that there were two Cold Wars that was waged. One was against Russia, one was against NATO, against India. This Cold War against India actually ebbed a little bit after 1990s and then after 1999 when the India one came to power. They also had this confidence in the UK, certainly, against all the evidence, that they can deal with this problem. But you see, I'm seeing UK Islamicized rapidly. They are all frightened. People think the BBC is anti-India. Yes, it is. But do you know why? One of the reasons is you do a program against Pakistan, your journalists will get death threats. That is enough to keep them quiet because you cannot protect every journalist. And people do get executed and assassinated and stabbed. We've seen all over Europe, Holland, France, England. So you make a death threat over the phone, that is enough to silence these people. Now, these people are caught in a trap of their own making. They nurtured this snake, and now the snake is raised its head against them, and they're scared as well. The US is not quite as exposed because of how far it is. But वहाँ पे भी आ रहा है. You look at any British university, they don't dare do anything against extremist Muslim organizations. That great terrorist who was important for that hijack was a student of the LSC. And the UK, as far as I'm seeing, even where I live, in the borough where I live, the council is frightened. They have passed laws which basically prohibit all critical comment against Islam. It says you cannot say there is persecution of minorities in Muslim majority countries. These resolutions have been passed across the United Kingdom. If this is not Islamic primacy, what is? It is coming. I always say to my British friends, आप अभी OIC join कर लीजिए. आप OIC membership के लिए application कर लीजिए. सब कुछ साफ हो जाएगा. दूध का दूध, पानी का पानी हो जाएगा. You will know then where you really stand. ये भी आ रहा है in Sweden, in Holland, partly in France. Now these people think we can deal with it. I'm sorry, they are in for a big shock. You know, the place which is most vulnerable is Scotland. The Islamic upsurge in Scotland is the most significant in the United Kingdom. ये अमेरिका में भी आएगा. But they still find Pakistan a useful tool for disciplining India. India उनका मित्र नहीं है.
नहीं, पर फिर वही बात गौतम दा, just doesn't make sense to me. या तो ये पागल खाने से निकले हुए लोग हैं, मतलब जेनेटिक डिफेक्ट है कोई यूरोपियन वाइट रेसेस में, जो इनको दुश्मन और गैर दुश्मन या पोटेंशियल फ्रेंड एलाई का फर्क ही नहीं पता. हिंदुस्तान कभी भी इनके खिलाफ नहीं गया, हालांकि जाना चाहिए. अगर मेरे बस में हो तो मैं तो बिल्कुल अप्रोच उठाऊं कि मुंह खोलोगी तो झप्पड़ पड़ेगा. कुछ भी बोला तो punch on the nose. I mean a political punch, because they don't understand the language of civilized discourse. They don't understand love. They don't understand compassion. They only understand power. And unless you punch them strong, they will not. So the
But you
point
know,
I'm making is this. Why do they want to discipline India when India is self-disciplined? That's what I want to know. You discipline those who are not disciplined. You discipline a Pakistan. You discipline Islam, which is a threat to human race, not just national security of this.
I think you need to understand two things. I mean, I'll give you two examples of the United Kingdom. There have been innumerable court cases and many, many things we have never come to court of literally thousands of young women, mainly white, some Sikh, some Hindu, but overwhelmingly young white women, who have been raped for 20 years by hundreds
Yeah,
and hundreds of Pakistani men.
yeah, we know
Gangs
that.
and gangs all over. You hear about one town, then you're shocked you hear about the town next door. You hear about Rotherham, then it comes to Oxford. Now, that's happened. One of them planted a bomb in the Manchester arena and killed 30, 40 young people. Even so, you're not allowed to say the rapists are Pakistani. You have to say they're Asian. This is what has happened to these countries. ये खत्म हो गया. ये इन लोगों ने खत्म हो गया. They cannot even speak the truth about what's happening to them. Now, India is a different issue because in India is a country they would love to control again. They
What
never
for?
thought. Then this is the
What for?
biggest victory for the West, Anglosphere, and Europe after Columbus. If you control India by Christianizing and have it under your thumb, you have reversed the decline of Europe, which began 100 years after the Second World War, in the 60s. This is what India is. India will change the nature of the global game, and the global game is only about power. And India provided the biggest manpower in the Second World War. The two largest armies of the Second World War were Russian and Indian. In 1958, the Canadian ambassador.
Let's talk of America for a minute, since we're discussing America. Britain is sinking, and the sooner it sinks, the better. I will celebrate. I will only worry that we get you out from there so that people like you are safe here. But Britain sinks, I'll be delighted. I'm not really concerned. I'm only asking you about America. ये किस लिए हमको कंट्रोल करना चाहते हैं? हम तो इनके बिजनेस अलाउ करते हैं, ऐसा नहीं कि बिजनेस नहीं अलाउ करते हम.
In the autobiography of the Canadian High Commissioner to India in the late 1950s, actually, I have a copy somewhere in the house. He reports a conversation with the CIA chief in Delhi, in which the CIA says we cannot fight a land war without India. India alone has the manpower. Now, this may be wrong.
Why don't we use our manpower? Hello?
Yeah, we are not going to give it to them. You see, India has not been a very good country. India has not played ball. India has always turned them down in 71.
No, but that's because they have always humiliated us. They have always undercut us. They have preferred Pakistan at the worst of times and the best of times.
Yes,
They're
yes.
lowly creatures. The American diplomacy, if you ask me, is the most self-demeaning diplomacy in the world because they love tin pot dictators, especially if they're Islam. Much of the tin pot dictatorships of the world have been propped up by America. Now, it doesn't show.
But you know, America remains the most expansionist, imperialist country. Everything we read and hear, Reader's Digest, Life magazine, all propaganda. They are an expansionist power. But I'm glad to say, even under Manmohan Singh, I hear when the Americans were threatening us and telling us to impose sanctions against Iran, the Indian side said to the United States, we will impose sanctions which have been ratified by the United Nations Security Council, not your unilateral sanctions. Even then we resisted. Say they don't like the way we behave and has never liked.
I mean, they prefer terrorists to somebody saying, look, we want to go by rule of law. I mean, does that itself not show madness of a very high order?
No, but we need to be nuanced. We need to be nuanced.
I mean, a real walking, talking cadaver, one of the most brainless men ever appeared on world stage.
You see, the terrorist issue is a very complicated.
The brainlessness of Americans.
The terrorist issue is actually a little bit more complicated than it might seem on the surface. You see, the real surge in terrorism in Pakistan, when civil society became a base for significant terrorism, was the Afghan war. And that was encouraged, in fact, sponsored and paid for by the Americans and the British.
Yeah.
Now, that has gone slightly out of their control. The people they really wanted under their thumb, which they still have, is the Pakistan army. Now, they have a bit of a problem because this is not their control. But they still get into bed with these same terrorists when it suits them. The United States with ISIS people in Iraq. They are still in bed with ISIS in Iraq. They bomb them and they collaborate with them against Assad. So they play all sides and they think they're very clever. So a backlash is coming, and there are Americans who are warning about this. But this is what Democrat administrations and Republicans have done. This ISIS business is most revealing. They knew they were creating slave camps for women. They knew all about this, but they funded ISIS, gave them weapons because they were fighting against Assad. Now in Pakistan, they also play games with them now. I will not be surprised if they have good contacts with the Haqqani network either. It's all part
Gautam, the moral of this, I mean, what are the conclusions we draw from it? That they're doing it, we know. That all these are Taliban, ISIS, are illegitimate children of the Americans. We know that. They are unke, kya bolte hain na, bastard children. We know that. The point I'm trying to make is even if you have to have um, progeny, the least you do is to make respectable children, respectable friends, respectable ally. What do it's this? This is not even a sensible power game. This is not a
No,
sensible power game.
I think this is something they are not willing to take on board. So the issue really is, what does India do about it?
Huh?
And,
Batao.
and India's response to this is, first of all, that it's alone in this war, and it must do what it must. But for that, we need to be more economically and militarily empowered. And I'm afraid to say all this celebration about Atmanirbhar in our arm production, both kuch hua, uh, compared to 2014 now. We have made a lot of progress, but I'm afraid a lot of the critical components of our domestically manufactured equipment is imported even now. A lot of the critical components. We are not yet able to make a jet engine for our Tejas aircraft. So
Yeah.
we are still way, way far away from being self-sufficient. We are trying, and that's the best we can hope for. At least this government is trying, and we have a little bit more money in India to expend on this. But as I said, we need peace and calm for the next 15 years or so to prepare ourselves. But the intervening period is very critical. And we as a people have to be much more united. But what am I seeing in India? That a democratically elected government is being told that you will carry out no policy on which you were elected. That we will oppose every single policy, even those in your manifesto. And who will oppose this? People who cannot win 2 seats, the CPM. Yogendra
Owaisi,
Yadav. They will decide what policy is possible. Now,
तो
here the
मोदी
government
को
is.
बताइए ना, let us find out what the problem is with our very what shall I say, bombastic prime minister. He talks like he rules the world and he rules the oceans and the skies. But we are so vulnerable within our country. How can you rule anything or be a Vishwaguru when the ground is slipping from under your feet within the home territory? And secondly, what is this great diplomacy that India is playing if Pakistan still remains the preferred ally of America? Then obviously our diplomacy is zilch. If America wants to caucus snook at us, they want to constantly poke us, humiliate us, then what's the big diplomacy we are playing? Why are we not doing anything about it?
No,
For
no,
example,
we have, insofar as we have maintained our relations with Russia, which is our alternative military and diplomatic partner. We've maintained relations with them despite a lot of criticism. Um, New things that happen. This jet business is a surprise. You see, this re-equipment of the F-16s is a surprise. I'm sure Indians are thinking about this. The only thing I will say, because I don't want to be unduly critical, is that in that brief period that I had some interaction with the government 20 years ago almost, I found that the world, from a government's perspective, with the information they have, actually does look different, and often there are reasons which are not shared with the public. So I always hope that there are good reasons and I reserve judgment. There are often priorities in the sequence in which we operate. For example, look, there is now a crackdown against two of the worst state governments in India. There is a crackdown. All of this is constrained by our rule of law, our politics, But there is a crackdown, which is going to be a very severe one on in Delhi and West Bengal. Ye to shuru to hua, and Maharashtra and Bihar, we can see. But we are constrained, and I do not believe our government is all powerful in India. And it certainly isn't all powerful in relation to the world. They make their calculations. Now, maybe in retrospect, we'll say these calculations are wrong, because I do believe the calculations of how to respond to the CA was wrong. And I think you believe that too. And there may be other episodes where we will say you made the wrong calculation. But I have to have some confidence in the good faith. Otherwise, we have nothing left. Unless I have absolutely concrete evidence to the contrary, I have to exercise judgment that I have confidence in my government. And they have done enough, in my view, the last 8 years. Enough for me to feel they are vindicated. Both sides, as you also admit, there are some areas of grave disappointment. For me, there are two. One is how quickly we react to the conversion racket. And the second one is the fact that we have made no attempt to change our national narrative in education. This is mightily puzzling for me. I don't
Oh
understand.
no, conversion racket is, to my mind, number two. Number one is jihadi violence. Modi ji surrenders before them. He doesn't utter a word when people get slaughtered, when young girls are burned to death simply because they refuse to convert to Islam and marry the man who was interested in making them a sex slave. He doesn't utter a word. There's no action taken. On the contrary, people who stand up when they go on a rampage, as happened during Delhi riots. All the Islamic rioters are free out with very flimsy charges by the police, but the Hindus who resisted and saved large areas from being burnt to cinders, they are in jail. They are in jail.
I think, all this business of being bailed out is ultimately due to the courts.
No, 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 no. If the police deliberately puts a very weak case on you, then you easily
And I was going to add that policing remains a state subject. That is a constraint. Policing remains a state subject
not in
unless
Delhi. Delhi is under
Delhi police, of course, is under the Home Ministry.
no. But
So
let's
there is
get
a
back
question
to
mark. There is
America
a
and
question mark.
let's
There is a
wind up
question
with
mark.
that. Let's wind up with that, which is we are not. Are we handling the security threat adequately with
My
regard?
view, my view is that the domestic security challenge needs to be dealt with more firmly. It requires political courage and, I'm afraid, some risk taking, because the courts and our political parties will create enormous difficulties. I am not concerned about how an individual gets ill treated, though it enrages me as a private person. But politically, judgment needs to be exercised about how you deal with this as a larger issue. But I do believe domestic security issues need a stronger approach. But otherwise, I am not going to criticize actually what I'm seeing on the border, and what I'm seeing are diplomatic maneuvering with a relatively weak hand.
Border still allows for illegal migration. They are coming in every day. It's the Bangla and the Bengal border is so porous. Every day they are pouring in. Obviously, our BSF is not up to the mark.
This border is very difficult to patrol, very, very hard. The Bengal border, it has so many river crossings. And of course, the state is complicit in this. The government of Mamata is complicit in this. And that is why I thought the 50-kilometer authority of the BSF to control was a very
But
important one.
BSF is so corrupt. They
That
take
too,
money and
that
they
too
let
I
it
hear. That too I hear. But
hideously corrupt.
I think governments in Delhi are not as powerful as we would like them to be. They are much more constrained.
If you fund madarsas, then you say you're not powerful. I mean, obviously, you're funding people who are out to slaughter you. If you funding these
I
people,
hope this will now stop in UP and Assam and set an example for the rest of India.
Assam may do it. UP has been constrained from doing it. Anyway, let's come back to America and its love for Pakistan and its defense. The concluding part, before we take on questions, if there are any. What I want to know from you is this. After a very humiliating exit in Afghanistan, is America now trying to recover by cozying up to Pakistan and then through Pakistan get back to Afghanistan? What is it that they're up to?
I think the main explanation of renewing ties with Pakistan, for whatever reason, is that it's very low cost. So they can afford to spend the money regardless of where it leads. $450 million is tiny considering $12 billion will go to Ukraine very shortly. So this is a very low cost venture to find out where it will lead. But I'm afraid the issue for India will be once these jets are re-equipped, Pakistan will feel we can deal with another Balakot. So let's do a big terrorist attack on India. That will be the upshot. Once the Air Force is much more powerful, because now they are quite terrified of India, they'll say, "Theek hai. We can retaliate." That is the key, that we can retaliate against a conventional Indian attack. So this is what we have to wait for while this dismal business of US aiding Pakistani terrorism unfolds. That, I think, is what we need to worry about. Now, I'm sure New Delhi is perfectly aware and preparing for these contingencies. अब क्या करें?
कुछ नहीं करे, कम से कम उनको भेज रहे हैं मोदी जी, अफगानिस्तान में भी भेज रहे हैं फूड पैकेजेस, फूड, free food, free medicines to Taliban. I mean, is it
मोदी जी
any
वो तो ठीक है, नहीं वो तो ठीक है, वो तो ठीक है. अब तो पाकिस्तान और अफगानिस्तान का रिश्ता इतना अच्छा नहीं है. There are serious problems. They have problems of a direct kind with Pakistan, which they don't have with us. So yeah, food and medicine actually is very low cost for us.
Taliban को?
Unfortunately, you cannot aid the people of Afghanistan except the Taliban. This was a worry for our people. Directly, you cannot.
Why do we want? What did we ever get by aiding Afghanistanis?
You see, what the senior people in Delhi told me is that we would like to help the people of Afghanistan who've never really been hostile towards us as ordinary people. But our dilemma is any help we exchange has to go through Taliban. And this is the problem. That is what you're identifying too.
Has Pakistan ever stood up for India when it's been abused? No. Have they ever said that so many of us, when we are called Islamophobic, when we are called fascists for trying to kill and slaughter Muslims, has any Afghani leader or even its people stood up loud and clear and said, no, when we go there as refugees, we are treated well? That's one country that does not treat us as enemies or doesn't discriminate against us. Have they ever stood up for us? No.
I would leave aside these major ambitions of what we might be able to do, but a much more modest goal of engaging with Afghanistan is to dissuade them from sending hardened fighters to the J&K border to fight against India.
They've never stopped.
No, they have not yet. The hardened fighters have not showed up amongst the people who are not from Afghanistan. They have the capacity to cause us a lot of trouble. This is what we are trying to avoid. Maybe it will fail. We are trying to avoid this, that their Afghan fighters don't start appearing in large numbers. This is the only modest aim.
I think we're just too goody, too pious, too this, too that. They won't when it is jihad and the commitment to spread Islam all over the planet and mission Ghazwa Hind, then all these wonderful goody things don't really matter.
And this is not good. This is like a calculated move. But let's see where it leads. I mean, it may fail, but this is all we have as an option to do, to try and dissuade them.
No, don't allow any refugees. Shut your doors and say, you handle your affairs with Pakistan. Let them be busy fighting with each other. Why the hell should we even try?
But broadly speaking, that's where we are at. Broadly speaking, except for small amounts of aid in food and medicine.
Why? You're legitimizing them. I
Well,
would like
this
all
is the
relations
calculation
with
which has been made.
Pakistan to. Why we playing cricket matches? Why we legitimizing Taliban? Why we legitimizing this terror launchpad called Pakistan by maintaining diplomatic relations? This needs to stop. If you want to control the jihadis within, you have to break off relations with the source of jihad, which
Well,
is Pakistan.
I think this actually is not a realistic option because um, there are reasons why nuclear rivals maintain diplomatic relations with each other. There are sound reasons why the Russians and the Americans never broke, and they never will, nor can we do so, even if we think it's a good idea. There are sound strategic reasons why we cannot break complete diplomatic relations. We have cut down their Delhi embassy to size, but we can't break completely. There are implications in terms of deterrence strategy for not doing so, and well-founded reasons. So on that note, Madhu, we both leave disappointed but hopeful, because
Let's
we are
see if
better
there
off
are
now
any.
than we were in 2013,
Yeah.
despite all.
Okay. Viewers,
Thank
do you have are there any questions that you would like to ask? Yes, there's one here. How can we call police as state subject when basic rights of people are violated? There should be a way for center to intervene, else we are just a banana republic. क्या कहेंगे?
well, we need to change the constitution.
Yeah,
For terrorist matters, of course, the state can and does intervene for issues of national security, but it cannot when an individual is slaughtered or raped, which, of course, is outrageous. But we need a constitutional change to be able to do that, and that is a can of worms. That
no,
could be very.
president's term could have been imposed after the violence unleashed by Mamata Di after winning the election. She'd won it, and yet she went berserk. So
I think
Abhinav,
that, I do think that would have been politically very difficult because she had just won an overwhelming majority, and yes, what she did and got away with is a crime. But that's
there
what
are
was.
reasons why we should play Dhimmi all along. One can find any number of
I
reasons.
understand Abhi Nag's point, and I'm broadly in agreement with what
Like
he's saying.
Bharat to rise, is there pet to keep Hindus at bay? I want both of your views. The Anglo-Saxon world does not want a pagan power like Bharat to rise. बोलो क्या बोलोगे?
I broadly agree. Want to say to Mr. Nag that so-called pagans never called themselves pagans, as Voltaire has made clear. It was a term of abuse used by Christians against them. So I don't like to call myself a pagan. You know, um, any other will do. Polytheist भी कहो, कुछ भी कहो. Pagan तो काली था. कोई बात नहीं. It is not a big deal, but they have so corrupted the entire discourse, and that we use their terms even to describe ourselves. We have to get out of this comprehensive.
Sure.
You see, one thing we need to do, you have to have a degree of hostility towards the outside world in order to find yourself. That is why, that is what all other civilizations do. You have to have a degree of uh, rejection. That is what
Sure.
we do. हमारे घर हर वक्त खुला रहता है. Everything what he thinks is a good idea, it is not a good idea. You have to feel a degree of, even if you like, irrational dislike of the outside world.
अच्छा,
This is
घर
a
ही नहीं खुला,
survival point.
बेडरूम में ले जाते हैं जहाँ आपकी बेटी सो रही है, आपकी पत्नी सो रही है, यहाँ लेके जाते हैं हम तो.
वही तो
ऐसे मूर्ख है.
वही बात है. बिल्कुल वही बात है.
चलिए, it seems there aren't any more super chats, so we will wind up here. 2-3 जो भी थी.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Madhuji. Thank you.
Gautam da, thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaskar.
And India is always on a boil. There isn't a peaceful, calm day. I would love to get time for boredom, and you can't. That's to me a very sad thing. I'd really love to sit back and be bored. Is there any time? If you watch India, do you get
All the
time to
time.
be exasperated? Yes. angry, yes, depressed, yes, everything.
And
But
arterial clogging. That's the
and
outcome.
yeah,
वही
that's
होता है.
वही होता. Okay,
Okay,
Gautam.
thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, viewers. Please do like, share, and support, and see you tomorrow with something interesting. Shubh Ratri, Vande Matram.